My name is Gabriella and I am presenting hashtag it's 7:25 in Texas. That's bullshit. And so, basically what I'm discussing is minimum wage discourse on social media. And I decided to choose Tumblr because it's been very popular and becoming more and more popular over the years. I actually go on Tumblr. I started in 2010. That is 2014. It's gone up to 216.3 million monthly visitors. And this is people who run, food blogs, art blogs, pretty much anything you can imagine is on Tumblr. So Tumblr is like Facebook in the fact that you have a wall that you can see all of your friends' posts, but it's like Twitter in the fact that you use hashtags to put, a label on what you're talking about. And so with my literature review, I discussed, people who were pro and con minimum wage. You see that a lot of people who do research on minimum wage are economists. That's a hard word to pronounce. And what they say is that minimum wage is bad because it raises prices of goods and services, which raises prices of, how much money something is worth, and then people lose more jobs because of the increase in prices, and they have to lose jobs in order to make up for that increase in price. But a study by Kruger and Card discussed the bias in this economic research because it's very politically based. It's based off of more, business type things rather than just a sociological in-look about minimum wage. So my methodology for this project is that I searched the minimum wage tag for 3 weeks every day to see who was discussing minimum wage, what they were saying, and why they were saying it. And so I was looking for stories from individuals. I was not looking at politically fueled blogs. It was very easy to tell which was politically fueled or media-based. And so it was very easy to distinguish those from people who were actually telling their stories. I used word choice, heavy profanities, things like that, context clues of what they were talking about, people who said, yay, like, I have a job better than minimum wage, and things like that to get kind of an idea. You could almost hear the sarcasm in some people's voices when they were talking online. So I'm going to start talking about what kind of people I found. There are 2 perspectives, the liberal and conservative, and then there are 3 subsections in each. So the first subsection in the liberal perspective are called living wage moralists, and these are the people who think, how dare you let people live in poverty? It's not fair to them that they are trying to work hard and you are only letting them have minimum wage and they cannot survive on minimum wage. So they believe that minimum wage should be a living wage because they think that people, who have children, who are trying to support themselves, and others, people who are just out of college and can't really find a high-paying job out of the start, and they say that, like, how dare someone live in poverty? How could someone do that to another person? They are very much liberal in this sense that they want to help everyone out and that everyone can be included and live a decent life. And they use these points from factualists, which is my second group. So factualists are people who use infographics to give actual facts, usually from the Census Bureau, in terms of talking about who is involved in minimum wage, who works minimum wage, why people do minimum wage and things like that. And so they always source their cite their sources well. And so you can see here that someone who normally is considered someone who works minimum wage, a high school student who's trying to get more money for video games and stuff, is actually generally someone who's 35 years old who's trying to support a family. A lot of them are women. And so they use these facts to make the point that we should increase minimum wage because these are people who actually need it. Instead of thinking, oh, these are stereotypes, that we're not actually talking about, kids in high school. We're talking about people really needing to make money in order to survive. And the third group that I talked about were the exploited. Now, these are college students just like us who, either just got out of college or they're still in it and thinking, oh my God, I have to get a job. And a lot of them are living, minimum wage jobs. And people who can't afford apartments, people are very, very often complaining and using profanities to describe their disgust with the system. And so, an example here, this poor young lady is very irritated by the fact that she cannot find a job. Her post in particular was about how, I can't believe like I'm out of college and I can't get a job over minimum wage. How am I supposed to live? And so their main point is, I can't live like this. And why do you think I can? I don't understand. So someone did get a job that was over minimum wage. And so they're really excited about it. But you could tell that many people were really frustrated over the fact that they could not get a job beyond minimum wage. So now I'm going to start with the conservative perspective. Now the first section of the conservative perspective are the economic rationalists. And so these are the people who say, well, I took an Econ 101 class, and from what I learned, minimum wage is bad. And that is essentially their point. They never cite any sources. I've only seen, I think, 2 posts out of God knows how many that actually cited sources saying so. So they generally just go off of the, well, I got a college education. I took Econ 101, so I have the authority to say why minimum wage is bad. And their general argument would be argument that many economics made in the literature review that I just recently discussed. The second group are the alternativists. And so these are the people who say, oh, you want a $15 minimum wage? Meet your replacement. A very nice self-checkout. They are saying that, oh, you want to make $15 an hour? You are just a high school kid who just wants money for more video games. Or you want more money for alcohol if you're a college student, which is, as the factuals say, not the case. But these are the people who say, this is not supposed to be a living wage. This is supposed to be a starting point for young teens, and people who are working minimum wage as adults shouldn't be. They should be having actual jobs, and, well, I should say actual jobs, and actually having a salary. And these are based mostly on unfounded assumptions, saying, like I said earlier, these are teens who are trying to get money for more things rather than actual adults trying to get money to survive. The last group are the privilegists. These are people who say, having a cell phone, having a computer, having internet, having a phone in general, and having, someone even said a bathtub, is a privilege, not a right. And so these are the people who would say, people on welfare are welfare queens. These are people who abuse the system in order to get the money that they want for Coach bags and new cars and things like that. This is not the case, but they believe this, again, unfounded assumptions, and they say that minimum wage are for the uneducated, and that the people who are living in minimum wage or trying to make a living out of it are stupid and don't deserve, an education, and they don't get one. And they should get one, but they're apparently too stupid to get one, and very often they're contradictory, saying, oh, well, they should get an education, and then, well, they're too stupid to get an education. And so they don't believe that minimum wage should be a living wage because these people are not getting an education and cannot afford one. And so what this conclusion is, that this is just the beginning of the research in this kind of field. So now that we know that, public opinions represent online opinions through the studies that I did about Twitter and its relation to public polling, we can tell that this is something that people are talking about. This is something that millennials are talking about. People on Tumblr are generally 13 to 25, and so these people are really discussing minimum wage. They're taking a lot of thought into it and wondering, what can we do about it? And there are people on both sides, clearly. And so the liberals tend to be louder about it in general just because it's a topic that they're more interested in, where conservatives might be interested in more into gun control or other such things rather than minimum wage policy. But when the strike in December 5th happened, the protests about, oh, we want a living wage, I think it happened in New York and Boston, the conservatives became much louder in their disagreements about minimum wage because it was brought to the forefront of media. And I think that because millennials are talking about it, this is something that really needs to be discussed, rather than having economists just talk about how it's bad or there's not enough sociological research that really determines whether or not minimum wage is good. And so I think that we need to look more into this kind of stuff in order to be able to understand where millennials are coming from, because millennials are clearly not just being lazy or, you know, just staying in their parents' house until they're 26. They're trying to make their lives, but can't. And these are my resources, references.
I was out fooling around with a tech problem, and so you may have said this, but can you distinguish between gender and region in the Tumblr accounts?
So, no. It's a short version. The long version is, no, you can't sort it out by region specifically, because it's not like Twitter where you can put your location on, or it's not like Facebook where you have like a little info page. There is no info page. It's all just your blogging. You can put a little about me in a little section on a personal blog, but in the minimum wage tag, you're not searching individual blogs, you're searching everyone who's talking about it. Yes?
I was going to add a Tumblr. So did you weigh in significance on the amount of likes or blogs on what people had to say? Because I know when you look up a hashtag, the ones with the most activity sort of rise to the top.
So what I did was, for that case, because when you do look up a tag, it does show you the most popular ones first. I was tracking it, and so you see the new posts rather than the popular ones, so that I could get more nuanced information rather than just the popular things, which for the most part were news articles talking about it. But I didn't include those in my research because that was news and media, and I was trying to focus on the individual. Yes?
And when you say politically fueled, you obviously have some responses in here that are politically fueled in some way. So.
By politically fueled blog, I should have specified this, I'm sorry.
No, sorry.
By politically fueled blog, I mean blogs that had the title, like, Ronald Reagan is a terrible president, which is actually a blog. So, blogs that were specifically talking about politics, I excluded because these people are clearly outliers in the fact that they're discussing politics all the time. And so by a politically fueled blog, I meant people who were discussing it all the time, rather than people who use Tumblr for other things, but occasionally make a post about something political. Yes?
Were you able to look, or can you look at what other kinds of things they're posting to see kind of if there's correlation between if they're posting these political things and what other things they're posting about? Did you look at any of that?
I can, and did. So you can look at people's individual blogs to see what they're looking at and what they're talking about. And for the most part, these people were just people who were blogging about their lives, about themselves, about, you know, fashion that they liked, food that they liked, you know, like a typical, I would call it a typical blog. And so you can get those kind of information from the demographic. So I was looking through some of the blogs that kind of talked more about minimum wage to make sure, one, that they weren't politically fueled. So you can get a correlation between this and what they usually talk about. And so the liberal blogs actually generally had a little bit more political talk, but the conservative ones didn't. But when the protest happened December 5th, then you could see a lot of the conservative blogs really had an influx of posts about minimum wage, and they really got more involved. Yes?
I think this is really interesting stuff. And if somebody gave you a grant for a couple of $1 million, what would you do with it?
I would certainly look into it more. I wish I had more time to do this research. This was actually my senior seminar project for my sociology.
Sure, of course.
And so what I would do with the money is I would actually contact the website Tumblr and be like, hey, can I do this research? Can I do surveys? Can you help me get people to actually talk about this thing with me? And I would do a mix of qualitative and quantitative data where I have a survey, but then I might have actual interviews, seeing about people's opinions and more in depth and more, you know, robust information rather than just me looking on Tumblr for 3 weeks and just staring at posts all day.
Oh, horrible month that was.
It wasn't that bad just because I am on Tumblr and I do enjoy Tumblr. And because it's been getting really popular, you see a lot of interesting things on it. But the tag itself was relatively, you know, besides these 6 groups, you really didn't see much else.
It's interesting. I was reading an article earlier this week, and I know Facebook's the old social media now, it's out of style, but there was some research on when people unfriend each other on Facebook, and a lot of it was motivated by, a lot of unfriending is motivated by, you have a weak tie to the person to begin with. There may be an old friend, someone you knew from high school but don't know that well, and you got tired of their political posts. So I wonder if there's a change over time in Tumblr, on Twitter, and things like this, of the impact of these kinds of posts. That would be interesting to look at too.
Through personal experience, I have known people to unfollow the people who had too many political view blogs, but these are generally more about race and gender rather than political stuff like minimum wage. Minimum wage was not talked about as much as race and gender are. Race and gender are two really big topics on Tumblr. Things about the LGBTQIA community and things as such are more often discussed than minimum wage. So people who make posts about minimum wage are generally not unfollowed as often just because they aren't as frequent. But I wouldn't doubt that because Tumblr is mostly liberal, that the conservative posts probably led to some people unfollowing them.
Yeah, and they end up in like separate bubbles. Or they could
Yeah,
end up
they
in
really do
separate
end up